Chef Dev, along with
Talk about it amongst America.
Pastor Archie.
But we also want to talk about it amongst ourselves because we are the model.
And we discuss topics and how they get to a certain tipping point.
So if we do well,
KCPZ, Praise 95.3.
then things tip toward the godly way. If we don't do well, things tip towards a satanic way.
And so our objective is to look at where we're at and really discuss some issues and how we can move things.
What we got this morning?
Well, we need to, I think we need to continue our conversation to talk about kind of post-election reality.
Okay.
And we start dancing around a little bit of a conversation I think we need to continue on also, which is this whole justice after the fact. I mean, we talked about the police shootings, we talked about the shootings of African Americans, but is justice equal when an African American is injured or the victim, or is it not equal?
No, I can answer that for you now. Game over. No, it's not.
and we need to talk about that because I think what we're suggesting to many folks is, kind of let justice have its way, and then you run into situations like this. Now, and they talk about like people will make an exception about. There are two things that I've heard people say.
Okay.
One of them is, but the cop who did it was black.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about whether or not it's black on black crime. We're talking about whether or not the system, the justice system, is unfairly oppressive to African Americans.
Yeah.
And I think we believe without a shadow of a doubt that it is. However, like any other situation, you can't tell whether or not you are. You can't tell whether or not you are. You can't fix a problem that you have not admitted. So I think that we, especially the majority of our white brothers and sisters and the broader white community who are not believers, seem to feel, they seem to be in denial about what is an obvious reality. And it's been a long-term reality.
Well, I think that for the most part, our genuine white brothers don't want to believe because I think they want to be equal. I think there's a lot of people my age that's 30s, 35 to 45 that could have grown up in a non-bigotous type of culture, family. I think the bigness comes from those going to be closest to you. If you have a white guy that grew up on 55th Street and went to Central High, he may be treated just like I was.
Well, I think that he may face the same economic dilemma, but I think that if you add up how the system is treated, so that becomes the bigger difference. So,
the reason I say that is because I know a couple of white dudes that when we get pulled over, he's gonna get pulled out just like we gonna get pulled out. I think it's an aura. I'm not gonna say he's gonna give the cop the same attitude, but we get pulled over, I'm gonna be mad like, what you pulled me over for? You gonna feel the same way. I think it's a culture thing. Now, that's not to say that the cop wouldn't want to treat him differently because he's white, but I think overall, when the cop sees that our culture is the same, we both hop out, we both got sagging pants, you know what I'm saying, hat cocked, I think the cop is gonna say that he culturally identifies with us.
I would agree with you to some degree. However, I believe that from the time of arrest, I think that a cop is more likely to pull a gun on you while you're sitting in the truck than he would the white guy.
Oh, definitely. I would agree with that.
Yeah. So, and I think that if you guys went to court, as in the court trial that we're looking at, then the concern about the white person seems to override the concern about the black people if a black person is the victim. Let me give you two examples. one of them, one of the concern about the perpetrator. That is a different concern when the perpetrator is black. Concern about the perpetrator. One judge looked at this perpetrator. He was white. Of course, his victim was white also. But they looked at him and said the heinous crime that he did must have been a momentary lapse in judgment.
Okay.
And so therefore, I prefer, rather than to mess up his career and his opportunities, then he I will forego, this was in the rape case, I will forego, the normal standards and give him the minimum of what I could give him. And so that was in the rape case. Another situation was this one that we just saw.
The McKnight joint?
You look at in this one where you see the cop, the first one was when the guy raped the girl.
Yeah, the Stafford kid.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And this one,
We talking about the manslaughter with the killing of Joe McKnight? Next.
yeah, we're talking about,
Okay.
we're talking about the cop who, killed the guy running in the back.
Oh, okay, you talking about the Walter Scott case.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, in that particular case, the notion was, the argument was, that one of the jurors felt, I could not, in good conscience,
Mess up this man's
mess up this man's future.
Now,
But
was it was it the sole black person on the
no, because he
the
was the chair. He was the chair,
Okay.
and so it didn't appear that it was him. I think they kind of picked him.
Here's what
I hate to say this.
Yeah,
It felt like.
Yeah.
It felt like. I can't justify this, but it felt like let's make the black man the chair.
Well, I know, huh? Wow.
Right.
I read that when they broke for recess on Friday, they had a verdict.
Well,
and they came back Monday and said we don't have a verdict.
Well, I thought that when they broke for recess, they said that they were at a stalemate, and the judge told them to continue. That's what I thought.
Okay.
He told
Maybe
me.
I read it
I think
wrong.
they wanted to surrender at that particular point that they were a hung jury, and he said,
No, keep going.
keep going and deliver.
So what happens now? I mean, so it's a
Well, it
mistrial.
has to be retried.
Okay, so it's
So the
another
prosec-
trial.
Yeah, so, it's up to the prosecutor. If the prosecutor says, I'm going to try this case again,
Okay.
and go from there. Now, here's another thing.
Have we heard that he's going to do that?
I think there's been some rhetoric about him doing it. And so,
Okay.
sounds like he's ever tried a case. But here's the other thing, I think. If I were a prosecutor and I understood the system,
Would you give him try for a lesser charge?
I would have went for, I would have been
Manslaughter.
for first degree manslaughter.
Okay, so is it too late for him to go for first degree manslaughter?
I don't know the law well enough to know
Okay.
that, and I don't know the law in that state well enough to know that. And so,
So the prosecutor
he
could
thought
say
it was a clear case of
a murder. So the prosecutor can now say, well, since it's hung jury, then I'm not going to retry you, and you're basically off on the charges.
Yeah, I mean, hung jury, you can just decide not to retry the case because it's a criminal case.
Now for his civil charges, he has
Civil
he
charges
has a
are
whole
going
bunch
to
of
be
civil
against the
charges.
department. The civil charges is going to be wrongful death, but I think they're going to go for the department because he represented the department at the time.
No, I'm talking about he has civil charges that can send him to jail.
No, the civil charges is going to pay money.
No, there's some other charges that they said he has more criminal charges not the civil, but he has other criminal charges other than murder, like improper use of force, weapon, all that other stuff.
Yeah, most of the time when you have a charge, when you go to trial, you go to charge based on a number of charges.
Okay, but they just headlining for the most.
And so what will happen is the jury will convict. The jury will be challenged to give an answer on each charge.
Okay,
And so.
so for the murder, it's a mistrial. Now, does the jury say guilty or not guilty on the 3 or 4 other charges following the murder, or are they saying we're going to mistrial everything?
Yeah, if you try the case
Uh-huh.
based on that. Now, here's what I do know: the jury is supposed to give a guilty or not guilty verdict on all of the charges that made it all the way through. It's like most of the charges, a lot of charges are dropped during trial because what prosecutors actually do or litigators actually do is they kind of throw as much as they can up there. So you might have 20 charges. and then by the end of the trial, you may have 4 charges.
Gotcha.
You know, because a lot of that stuff fall off as you go through, because it's not proven in the case, so it doesn't go back to the jury box.
Gotcha.
So if you can't prove during trial, then the judge just says you give, you know, kind of a judgment from the bench.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is now you go back with the case, with the things that stuck, and the jury has to make a decision on that. That means the law is not definite on that, and the jury has to make a decision. You know, and so in this particular case, they only talk about the murder. So I don't know if he just brought the one charge in this case, and then asked for kind of separation of trial for some of the others, which doesn't make sense. I would have to look into the case, and I would have to talk to an attorney in that state.
Whoever that juror was, like, they don't even have to give a reason, do they?
No, you're a jury. They give a reason in a jury room.
Yeah, like
probably just in your deliberation, but he just said I can't be clear conscious. But I think that it is this.
Like
now let's take a different case. The case where the girl where statutory rape with the guy who had a promising career in sports, black guy.
Okay.
Slept with the girl, didn't know she was underage, and she was 15, and the judge gave him 10 years, which means his college career is gone, which means his sports pathway is gone, and he got folks looking at him and everything else. And I think it was obvious during the trial that the girl fake ID'd him. I mean, she did everything, and she was the kind of aggressor at record. She was the one that went after him, but none of the folks, whether in the jury box or the judge, said this guy has hope and a promising career. He has a paid opportunity. There was not this assumption there's not this concern about his pathway of success. Now, he didn't have he had a legal victim, but when you come to a practical victim, a 15-year-old who is aggressively going after him, who is also sexual promiscuous, and then, you know, it's just that she hadn't been sexually promiscuous with a black guy before.
Yeah.
And so now she persuades him in this particular case, and I'm not saying he's totally innocent because, you know, it takes 2 people to tango. But in this particular case, there was no motive.
We don't care about
or
it.
intent
He's black,
or anything.
you know,
Right? Yeah. So that's
Yeah,
the kind of thing that you get across the board, where you look and say, okay, if we are as a justice system concerned about the damage that we could do on an individual victim who had a lapse in judgment, then it should be across the board.
But here's the thing: the justice system is one thing, but I think it's systematic racism that allows jurors, supposedly a jury of my peers, which they're mostly white all the time, even in black cases. They're mostly suburban white people. When you're talking about a guy from the inner city that's on trial, how are you a jury of my peers? That's the first thing. But I think it's just systematic racism that allows them to do that, and then it be okay. And then the juror gives their reason, whatever it is, cover it up. It's really because you're black and she's white, but I'm going to cover it up with whatever reason I want to say. And then, so we could blame the justice system, but I think justice system says, hey, we've put this process. Now, here's the thing. I think justice is guilty when you're saying we're going to choose a jury of our peers, and they're not black. Like, if you want black people on, then I'll be like, okay.
Well, here's the argument. Here's the argument that I have with that. I think it's more the justice system that was designed and developed and grew up. So like if I grew up in the hood, I got some hood in me.
Yeah.
It grew up in the era of Jim Crow, and it established a lot of policies, amendments, and strategies based on Jim Crow ideology. And then all of a sudden, we removed Jim Crow. It would be like if you took me from the hood and moved me, to the suburbs and thought, okay, well now his hoodlumism is over.
Yeah.
It ain't gonna be. I mean, I got a lot of hood in me because that's where I grew up. My system was developed that way.
Yeah.
In the same way, I think the system is developed based on the ideology of oppressive kind of we'll put it this way, oppressive ideology toward that were based on race.
Okay.
And so therefore the system is bent that way, and we have to, you really have to kind of redesign it in a lot of different ways so that its objectives are different. But here's where I would defend the jury piece. The jury process cannot come in and say pick some black people or some white people. It cannot make its selection based on. It can't tell.
It does.
It can't tell lawyers. It can't tell lawyers. But the system is a random selection.
It can pick a jury selected on their address, and that's most likely going to give you the type of person
it's a random selection of people come into an environment. Usually, let's suppose you have 40 people, and then you rule out all those people who are systemically ruled out. Like if you're a preacher, then we're going to take you on that. If you there are certain things that rule you out. If you are involved in the case, if you got a relative, if you are a fan of the person who's up there, all that stuff.
This is
so
what
you
I'm
rule it
saying.
out. So wait a minute. So you boil it down to who's left.
Yeah.
And most of the time, if you ever sit in that jury room, as we said before, juries are selected a lot of times more on an economic bent than it is on anything else.
That here's the thing.
And the reason why
I
is
went to
because-
a trial of a close friend of mine, and
Now, did you go through the jury selection process?
no,
That's
I
what
went
we're talking about.
I went through the jury selection process probably about 4 months ago.
Okay. And
All
so
right.
now, tell me
So-
what your experience was like.
My experience there was it was about 50, 60 people to start off with.
Okay.
Okay, and then they send you in the room and they say, has anybody ever heard of this?
Right.
And if somebody raises their hand, okay, then, the defense lawyer goes first, or, you know what I'm saying, the prosecutor goes second, and they kind of rule. And then at the end they say, I want to excuse jury number so-and-so, 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 so, and then they do that. And then they boil it down to 20 people. And then with those 20 people, you know what I'm saying, it was like, hey, I want to hear from everybody. So they ask a number of questions. And then, this is what I think, and this is what I think, and this is what I think. You know what I'm saying? So here's my point, though. If because the guy that was on trial was a Mexican guy from the West Side. Okay, he was there. He had tattoos. He was in a suit and everything, but you see the tattoos coming up out of his neckline, so you can tell he was a G. You know what I'm saying? And he was sitting there, and I felt kind of sorry for the dude because you're in a room starting off with 60 people, and literally probably 8 or 9 of them was black. Probably another 3 was between, there was a Filipino and a couple other, Mexicans. So we're talking about maybe 11 to 15 tops minorities, and then 45 people that were white. You know what I'm saying? Out of them 45 people, I mean, it's just very interesting the kind of people that was in there. You had people who was like, I'd rather be back out in Butler on my farm. I got horses. Like, what does he have to do? How is he my peer? And he can't identify with anything.
And see, and I think that I just don't think that, in my personal opinion, I don't think that you could better randomize the jury selection process except for by moving the people to different venues. Like if you said, we're not going to prosecute that under this jurisdiction, we're going to move to a jurisdiction that's much more reflective of a different community.
So I mean, we were in Kansas City.
Right, I know.
You know what I'm saying?
So I think that the jury pool that you have was probably reflective of Kansas City percentage-wise.
Okay, so let me ask you this: if this is a Kansas City issue and not a Clay County or a Cass County issue, why they have people from Clay County and Cass County coming down here that doesn't know anything about the culture?
I think that, and I can't answer the question directly. I would say that the system, the selection system, is, in my opinion, that's why I keep saying my opinion, because maybe we can get Darren back on here who deals with it every day to talk about it. But I think the jury pool that you get to select from is, I don't know if it could be more randomized.
Okay, so let me tell you this. Let me say this. So the 12th juror in this Walter Scott case, this is a prime example. He could come from a rural area. What I mean by culture, he could come from a rural area that has breeded of culture of we kill black people. But if you got a person that was more integrated in an inner city culture that understands that we are just as equal as you, we wouldn't have had that 12th juror that was like, I can't see sending this white man to jail for doing something that I believe we should be doing anyway.
But that's a lot of speculation. I could probably say you could have, because you have just as many neo-Nazi, KKK driven white people in the hood as you have anywhere else.
But they understand the culture. That what I'm saying.
They understand
when we go to the gas station together that they keep their Nazism to themselves though.
Right, but when you get them in the court, just like if you get them in the booth to vote, they're gonna vote based on neo-Nazi. I don't think they're gonna get. If you're a neo-Nazi and you see a white man kill a black person, then ideologically that's okay.
And that's what I'm saying.
And so even if you grew up in the hood, or if you're in poverty and you're in the same environment where economically distressed people are, you still
more times than not, if a person was born and grew up, and there's a lot of white people that grew up in the fifth, like 53rd, 54th, 55th.
Right.
They most 9 times out of 10. They identify with our culture and not our skin color. More times than not.
I'd say that's speculation.
Now maybe their grandparents that come in every Christmas be like, why y'all down here with these people? But if you 30 and you grew up on 55th Street, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have that kind of ideology.
And I would probably beg to differ in this way. There's a lot of folks during the transition where we were getting the right to move into past 39th Street.
Okay.
And so there's always integration in the transition. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So in the transition, a lot of blacks move into the neighborhood with a lot of whites, and then the kids that we play together, especially back in those days where we played outside all the time. So you had white people on your little street baseball team. You had a couple white guys that could jump, so they get on a basketball court. So you had all the different kinds of stuff that's going on. And those guys that we grew up with. Now those guys that we grew up with, when it came to our integration into a broader society, had a greater opportunity than us. Like for example, I said that when I was with the guy, we went to the same restaurant to get a job. We were in the same neighborhood, and so we kind of really copied off of each other on what to put on our applications. And so, different name, different address, but it was like, what'd you put for this? What'd you put for this? And so we had the same thing. Now, both of us got hired. I became the dishwasher, he became the busboy. So all of a sudden, now he's bringing me dishes, and his attitude went with, here, wash these. Then he gets promoted, and so you go on. Now, my point is when you integrate into broader society, and you recognize the benefit of privilege, then all of a sudden, and black people do this too, black people who are granted privilege to white people to be against black people will be against black people. Not all of them.
Not all of them, but and I would agree. But what I'm saying is, with the situation with the dishwashing thing, here's the thing: he may have felt equal, and just because somebody granted him that privilege doesn't mean his ideology was, I'm going to have privilege off top. Now, once it was presented, maybe it came out a little bit. But here's the thing. You said he came from a different area than where you were at.
No, I said that we were same dudes, same hood. Because I said during the integration period. So when our parents ended up in the same neighborhood because they granted blacks the opportunity to move in there, then all of a sudden the kids.
So the foundation of what you're saying is that this was their area and you moved in.
Exactly.
So it was like we're forced.
It was their parents. But let me say this: there was our parents' area. It was his parents' area, and his parents moved in. When we played ball in the streets of how we grew up, it was just us. It was just kids having fun and playing together. We knew he had to be on the team in order to make out a full best baseball team, and so all that stuff. So you had a genuine integration at our level.
Okay.
And I don't know what he heard at home, but I knew what I heard at home.
What I'm saying is, going back to this 30-year-old white kid that went to Central High that grew up on 55th Street and he grew up with me. He grew up, starting out with some Ice Cube, to E40, to Tupac. He grew up watching the same movies, going to the same liquor store, getting the same 40s, the same oldies, the same kind of cars, to where his whole life is because he's white and he's around other colors other than white, he starts to identify with lifestyle. Even the way he talks changes. It's different.
I get all.
So I'm saying his decision in the courtroom, I think, at 30 to 35 years old, will be based on culture versus just color. Just like the 35-year-old from Cass County, his culture is different. His culture is we're white, we're superior. So he's going to base his decision based off, you killed a black guy, one for the team, thanks, I don't think your life should be ruined.
Right, and I guess my argument would be, first of all, a lot of that is speculation. We've got to have some research to show that that's some reality. I think that we can.
I think the show's not about speculation, Pastor.
Right.
The show's about opinion.
But I think that if you look at, I just think that is,
I think that you want to see the best in the system. No. You want to see the best in the system. I'm going to show you the reality of it.
No, I'm showing you the reality, and you want to see the worst. I think that what you have is, if I follow your logic, the places where I would disagree is, I think that just like there are some black folks that grew up with us in the hood.
Okay.
You move them out to, let's suppose they go to church in the hood, they understand the problems of the hood, they see the hood as something we need to get better at, we get all that kind of stuff. And then they get an opportunity to move out to, let's say, Raytown during the integration of Raytown. You get an opportunity to go out there, they find the church, and they go in there, and that church sees them, they really say, oh, we got a black one. And so then they start treating that person with all of the love that they should be treating all of the other church with, and so they help this person. They give them a taste of privilege.
Okay.
And so now, when they say we need to do mission work, then they forget about the mission work next door. They forget their voice don't come up and say, "Hey, well, wait a minute, why are we going to Mexico?" When we could be helping these people, you got all this kind of stuff. That is kind of the taste of privilege that happens when you have a black person who has a limited taste of what it's like. Now, and here's the deal: he has black privilege. He could bring mission teams into the hood and do things that white people might be limited on because they don't have black privilege. But he or she doesn't choose to do that. They choose to go to Mexico. They choose to go to all the other places. And then, in order to justify that, they start saying, these people, all of a sudden now they're not you no more. These people are this way, they do this way, they look at black on black crime, look at this, and I don't think white people are all that bad, and all this kind of stuff. They begin to talk like they never came from the hood. That's what privilege does to people who are limited in their experience of privilege. Now, if you talk about somebody who can be fully engaged, I mean, I know white folks who are good people conceptually, in general, and they are in a segregated environment, deeply impoverished, so they're in deep poverty, but they enjoy the white privilege.
And that's
and
I agree.
So it's like if we're on equal ground economically, I don't want to give up the one advantage I have over you that is part of my birthright.
Okay, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying they're not there. I'm
saying that when you have a jury, I wouldn't go majority. I would
I'm
say
just saying
when you have a jury selection, then I think that same ideology comes in there.
I hear you. And I agree with you. There are going to be some of them people that's in the hood that don't want to be there.
But it's not even people that don't want to be there.
They tend to want to exercise their privilege from their discomfort. You know what I'm saying? So, but let's get to another situation. Let's get to another situation. And I was speaking about this a few minutes ago. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, the Joe McKnight thing. Okay, road rage, white guy, bang bang, you're dead. You're dead. I'm gonna scream over your lifeless body, and then you get to go home. That's the first insult. Then to add insult to injury, we're just gonna charge you with manslaughter. You see what I'm saying? Like, it was an accident. You know what I'm saying? That is because the culture down there is that we kill black people.
And now let me tell you a piece that I think is where I think some of our white brothers and sisters don't get it. So the issue comes up that he's been guilty of road rage before. And
Who has?
The guy who shot, the white guy.
Okay.
And he assaulted another person.
More of a reason for it to be
And then
murder.
people will say, but they were white. But what you're thinking is that the crime is the problem. And my argument
talking
is
about-
that the justification is the problem. So if in the first case it would have been a black person, our argument is that the justice system would have treated him differently. And so he wouldn't have probably been on the streets the second time, or either his penalty would have been harsh enough so that it would have made him think twice. But since he got justification the first time, and it don't. Now, what white people will say often is, yeah, but that kid, I agree, should have been treated differently, or whatever the case matters. He's just a spoiled brat. You kind of identify him in isolation, which to me is a problem because the system is supposed to bring justice. And that justice should not be based on how spoiled he was as a kid growing up, or how his mom treated him, or whether or not, you know what I'm saying? And so our argument is against a system that treats us differently and not necessarily incidents that are different. And those incidents are verification that the system has a problem and what we use to try to help them identify. So I would agree with you in this case. Now, the question is the choice of manslaughter. I don't know. I have to see the prosecutorial arguments.
Here's the thing that you can read up on.
Mm-hmm.
First degree murder is premeditated murder.
Exactly.
Second degree murder is murder out of rage.
Mm-hmm.
That means I got in a fight, punched me too hard, I killed him.
Right.
I was in rage.
Mm-hmm.
So if he was in road rage,
Mm-hmm.
then why would it be a first degree manslaughter? Like it was an accident. Manslaughter means it was accidental.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
And so,
And that's what I'm saying. It's like, you know what? The culture is we kill black folk down here.
mm-hmm.
Us white guys.
Mhm.
This is what we do. Look at our history.
Mhm.
We're pro-white. Now we have to. We've been forced to segregate,
Mhm.
but we still have our ideologies and our belief. All the way from preschool, all the way up to the chief of police.
Integrate.
Integrate.
Right.
So when the white guy kills the black guy, look, I know why you did it, and I understand, I identify with you, but we got to do something. So we're just gonna give you a minimal charge just to keep everybody in line.
And so, and I would probably say you could make that argument. I don't know enough about the ideological approach of the prosecutor for him to say, because what a lawyer does is look at what can I convict.
That's like
Not
saying,
necessarily what's true, what can I convict? And then they go based on what they can convict.
okay, so you're talking
Because-
about process or ideology, because I can only assume that if you are a 50 to 60-year-old white guy in that area, the culture
Mm-hmm.
is what's gonna tell you what direction or your attitude or how you handle things.
Well,
And
here's the degree to which that may be true from a prosecutor's perspective.
I'm talking about just from a person's perspective.
Well, it may or may not be true from a person's perspective, but I think right now we're talking about the charges that were offered against this person. I think that when you sit down and say, as a prosecutor, what can I convince a jury of? And what standards do I want to be held to?
Which
now,
aids
that's
what
why
I'm
I
saying.
said, it aids what you're saying in one way. In the other way, it aids what I'm saying in the other argument that it doesn't matter who grew up in that culture. It doesn't matter how much integration took place. You cannot select a jury and say, well, these people are in the hood, so they would understand hoodism more.
No, it's not about being hoodless. It's about being underserved and having a lesser justice.
No, I'm saying, I went back to the other argument, because your other argument was, if you pick some people in the hood, it would be a more fair jury.
Yes, I believe that.
And you just said, in this case,
Yes.
they pick people in the hood, and it's still not going to be a fair jury because the ideology of the culture.
No. But that's what I'm saying. When I'm talking about culture, I'm talking about, for one, we can go back economically. We can say that economical the minority, the majority of the economics in the hood are going to be one type of person. That one type of person is basically going to think like the majority of the underserved and unjustified people. What I'm saying, yeah, listen to what I'm saying.
I'm
Listen to what I'm
listening,
saying.
bro.
So, okay, so for instance, if most, and this is where I'm coming from, if you're a minority, most minorities have something in common. We are minorities. We are the bottom of the bowl. You see what I'm saying? So we have the same opportunities. We have the same trials and tribulations.
That's
and
why
we
I
grew up
disagree.
together.
That's why I disagree.
I don't. And maybe coming from where you grew up, from where I grew up, that's why we disagree, because there's a small age gap there. And what I'm talking about is in a world where I grew up, where black culture is influential to all races, it's very difficult. It's very difficult for a white person that's my age that grew up like me to have all these black idols and all this. You know what I'm saying?
And I would
racist.
probably say if both of you guys walked into a room, had your pants sagged, had your tattoos, and all things were equal
Yes.
from culture,
Yes.
and you walk into a place, you're going to get followed way more than him.
Okay, stop right there. You're
gonna
right.
get
You're right.
stopped
But that's
way
what I'm
more than
saying.
him.
But this is
You're
what
gonna
I'm
get
saying.
treated differently when you get stopped.
But
way
you're
more
talking
than him.
now. I didn't say we won't be treated different from
Right,
from an
right.
outside
And
entity,
so-
but we both identify with each other.
Right, I understand that, but
We
part of
can't,
that,
we can't choose how people treat us.
right, but part of that cultural upbringing, it still distinguishes you. Just like, some of the guys who I know who are very in deep poverty situations, living in a trailer park environment. I mean, those kind of things. They don't see themselves as bad, and I think we did this ideologically in our country.
Okay.
We intentionally did this so that poor white people would never feel as bad as poor black people,
Okay.
because at least you're not black. And so, yeah, they see themselves as having a white advantage, even if they're white. And what happens is they see themselves that way because that's what plays out in society. So when both of you guys go look for a job and we're going to give somebody a chance, then he's going to get a better privilege than you. Everything else.
Now
And so-
I'm gonna be you. I'm gonna be you. Well, we have privilege too. So if you live in the hood, it depends on where you go to get a job. If you're gonna get picked before you know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah. If he goes and try to get a job in the black community, then his white privilege is going to work to his disadvantage, and your black privilege is going to work to his advantage. However, here's the problem: he lives in a society where only 12% of that matters to him. 80-something% of that matters.
And that's because okay. Now I'm gonna say this. You're right. 80% matters looking at the big picture.
And
But
that's
most
where-
minorities are only focused on the area where that 12% is everything.
Right, I understand that.
You see what I'm saying?
And the reason why is because the ideological segregation is still there. That means that there are limited places you can go and feel significant. And there's a plethora of places he can go to feel significant. So if he ends up and you end up in foster care and you go out to Lee Summit and you're in foster care in a great family, and he goes out there, then he's going to end up getting a better job than you.
Definitely.
He's going to end up getting a better path
I
than you.
understand that.
Because now the
But you
privilege
just-
that you have and
but
the
you
privilege
just-
that he
but-
has, wait a minute, the privilege that he has and the privilege that you have, yours is cashable.
I understand.
In 12% of
But
the society
the
that
key
is.
that you just said was if I go to Lee Summit and he goes to Lee Summit. We're not speaking about that. We're speaking about the majority
But I'm saying,
of right
but
here.
he knows.
But he
He knows
that's not
that
true.
that is part of his cultural reality. When he was in school and he sat next to you and they talked about the great America. And when they talked about the great America, there were some black people also. He could see himself in the presidents that have already been in the past. He could see himself as the rescuer, the Santa Claus that have given everybody gifts. He could see himself as the Jesus who has, done all these great things. And you can't see yourself in any of those things.
Let me say it like this. The 30-year-old white dude from 55th says, you know what? Maybe I do have privilege. I'm going to get up out of 55th and I'm going to move to Leawood with my uncle who's been trying to get me out there.
Right.
So he goes to move to Leawood. He says, I'm done living in the hood. I want to be a regular white guy. And he puts on a suit and a tie, and he goes to the local insurance company to get a job and sits next to a white guy who's been out there, he's not going to get the job. Not because his blood's different, not because his suit is different, it's because his cultural his cultural appropriation is still identifies with the hood.
And here's what will happen. What will happen is they would say, hey, you've been living around the colors.
Exactly.
And you understand the colors. Now, what I'm going to do is just what they do, the same thing they do to black people or white people who end up on the news. Whenever a black story comes up, then they're going to dig out the black guy and say, because you grew up with him, even though you act like us and everything else, you grew up with him. Whatever. In the same way, they would do this. There's a white guy who grew up down there, and then they're going to send you to that community to rape that community of all the privileges.
If that's their goal. I'm just talking about just a regular job. The white guy who identifies with the Leewoodians is going to get the job, and the other white guy is going to be looked at as the minority because of his cultural appropriation.
If your target is, I can say this, when I got hired for Sprint, and once they understood, because when I got hired and I got in, I got the job, I was like, look, I'm looking around, man, this is a pretty bright room. And y'all giving all these new jobs to all these people who out here. I was like, look, there's some people, I know some people who need these jobs. Now, I was insistent. I ain't gonna stay out here without bringing my people out here also. And so this is a good little thing. And so I argued and fussed and fight. And so they finally got a bus to go down to the Quindaro, pick up some people and bring them out there. We had a lot of different things going on to go get some people from the hood or whatever the case of the matter is. Now, they were offering me an opportunity to enjoy the privilege of being amongst them. And so I could be on the bottom of the totem pole in their world, or I could be within the mix of the people in my world. I don't want to be at the bottom of the totem pole in their world. And so being that token black just didn't work well for me. Because I'm just, that's just not where I come from. And so, but I saw a lot of blacks who, when they got out there, even some of the ones that I went and got, when they offered them an opportunity, hey, look, you can be our token, then boom, they moved on to that way. But I also saw white people who grew up in the hood who understood how to mix well in the hood. And all they really did was they took that white person and put him in charge of most of the black people.
And I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. I'm just saying generally, they looking for that one person, and it's the white boy from the hood and the white boy that grew up out there. The white boy of the hood now becomes the minority because of his whole demeanor. That when you grew up around, you walk different.
I don't disagree with all those. Here's the only part that I would say is that he still gets the privilege. It's just that he recognizes that he can speak into that other privilege. And so, if you and this is not based on what I think is prejudice or bigotry. I think this is based on money. Oh, there's some money there too. I just can't get to it because this guy grew up in Lee Summit and he don't know how to talk to them people. But when you come in here and talk about what's up, I'm like, oh shoot, I got me one. I got me one that enjoys the privilege that we have, also has leeway into the privilege of them.
I agree, and this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's 100% all what I'm saying. I'm saying majority of the time. And cultural appropriation is so real, and I've dealt with it at certain jobs.
I think the hidden element of privilege is always there. The fact that I grew up in an environment where we were trying to integrate, so I'm a guy who has 50% of my world is white, 50% of my world is black. I even got a white name. I don't know why my mama chose give me that name, but when you come in and you say my name is Stanley, they be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, you cool, yeah. Apparently, but I think that with that reality, I think that that there's a sense of privilege that drives things way more than I think we give credit to, and that's not only practically, but God used privilege in significant ways all throughout Scripture. And his expectation is that when you give me, like when you tithe, you don't just tithe your material stuff. You tithe your identity, and you tithe your opportunity, your access, your privilege. And so part of that ought to be given to God. Now, what's happening is we give privilege based on race.
Yeah.
And some cultures give privilege based on relative, like blood relative. Like,
Okay, so you listening to the tipping point, and I hate to cut you off. I just got to say, hey, you listening to the tipping point every Saturday morning, 7:30 to 8:30, Wednesday nights at 9 to 10. Yes. Go. I'm sorry.
yeah. So I just think, I think that those are huge elements.
Now, here's the thing, because I want you to bring it back around to the kingdom. So, it's yes or no? Would you think that, because where I stand, privilege, we're going to speak specifically about the white privilege, is only derives from fruit of the poisonous tree of bigotry and racism.
I think privilege derives from God's grace in your life as it relates to the culture.
I'm talking about practical privilege. I'm talking about
I'm
right down
talking
to
about the
that.
exact same thing you're talking about. Like Nehemiah's privilege, did it derive from racism?
Okay, but if people were giving privilege
Based on
Based
their
on-
relationship to the culture.
no matter if it's right or wrong?
It doesn't matter how you get it. It always matters how you use it. Like my height, if I were really tall, is a privilege. Now I can use it to rob people, to bully people, or I can use it to play basketball. I'm gonna use it one way or the other. So I have privilege. I have a element that is part of my birthright that gives me an image in the culture that other people don't get.
Okay.
And so most of the time, if you calculate privilege is not based on something you decided on. It's based on how you fit into the culture.
Even if that's a
Whether it's good, whether it's good or
Nazi
bad.
culture,
Yeah.
that's white power is like we're gonna let you.
Yeah, if you're white and it gives you a voice to neo-Nazis, then the question is, how do you use that voice? Do you use it in silence? Do you use it to defend the kingdom? Do you use it to change ideology? I mean, how do you use it? You know, and so if I were a great friend of Donald Trump's, then I would have privilege.
If you were Ben Carson,
That other people have. Yeah, if I were Ben Carson, I would have. Let's suppose I was a businessman of his, friend of his, and I worked with him in a lot of business deals, and we got along well. I mean, I might disagree with his lifestyle or a lot of other things, but then that would give me a unique privilege in this culture because I'm now connected with somebody who is kind of elevated in this culture to have voice. And so now, I have that privilege. Paul had dual citizenship, so therefore he had privilege in more than one culture. And, but he had a specific privilege as a Roman citizen that a lot of other folks who were Jewish didn't have.
I want to say real quick to the listeners, if you've never heard the tipping point, I don't want anybody to listen and be like, man, y'all talk about white people all the time, and black people. It's not a racist conversation or a bigoted conversation, but it is a conversation that I believe that a lot of people that they're scared to have, and they're scared to voice their opinion on it. And we're not racist or bigots, but we have opinions, and I think these kind of conversations need to have. But I also love the way that at the end, like my whole mind just shifted when he brought in the kingdom privilege and that whole thing. Because I'm looking at white privilege as a bad thing.
Right, and I would say that's why right now we're going to put together a series that we're going to be going over called White Privilege, Black Privilege, and Kingdom Privilege. And then also my hope is that we started a manuscript that we'll have some writings on that so we can really kind of talk about it from a biblical perspective. But I think that our assumption is privilege is bad and privilege is used bad. So white people don't want to admit that they have it. Black people, because our culture is only 12% representative of us, then our privilege is limited. And so white people feel bad or don't want to admit that they have privilege in the white world. Black people don't want to admit that they have black privilege, and there's some benefits to the black privilege. You can go on and on and on. Now, if you talk to an Asian person, most Asians will say, yeah, I got privilege. and they take advantage of their privilege, they strategize around it, and they focus on it. They use it when they are a part of the kingdom, part of our community. They use it strategically as a part of their proselytation to reach other people. They know that their greatest win will come with people who they already have other privileged connections with. There's a whole lot of other things, and so some cultures recognize it ideologically and use it as in a kingdom way. It's just that because we have been so polarized by our privilege, that we haven't seen what it does. And one of the things is we try to make God make color go away. No, I'm not. I'm not going to make racism go away, because racism is embedded in a privilege that I've given people. And if you put those two privileges together, you can leverage your impact on the world in a way that will turn the world upside down in terms of missions.
There you have it. Tipping point. I guess this was more about more privilege. I just think I think the reason why I would say, right before we go, I think the reason that I would say the way that privileges is being presented today, to me, it's just been when it comes to law enforcement, and I think white privilege or the good old boy system or whatever, the white power, whatever you want to say, to me, where I'm at, it seems like that's the only reason that all these cops are getting off, because you're a white cop and they're a black person, and we're just going to give you a slap on the wrist because you're privileged in this country. This is your country. We are here to control them. They're not supposed to be here. They were our slaves at once, and we need to get them back in line. And that's what I look at.
Yeah, which is a misuse of privilege and misuse of privilege. However, I've sat with many white cops who recognize their kingdom privilege, recognize their kingdom-driven responsibilities with their privilege, and they do well on the inside, having conversations with people to persuade people to see things from a biblical perspective. And so I see a lot of evangelistically driven police officers who do an excellent job. Matter of fact, the majority of the ones that I connect with and know personally are on the bandwagon. They are part of us and will be in heaven with us. And they exercise whatever privilege they have, whether it's law enforcement or whether it's racially driven privilege, for the use of the kingdom. And I think you have some that don't, but most of the time when you see people who misuse their privilege, you also see a person, in many cases, you also see a person that does not live for the kingdom.
I got you. All right. Well, that was the tipping point. Until next time, we'll holler.